Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second round recap of Canadian Close Championship. So, in round one, I managed to get an amazing position with a nice opening preparation against the London system, and in round two, I was playing against the lowest rated player in the entire section. His name is Michael Blair. He actually was one of the main people in the organization of FIDE candidates in 2024. He was actually helping the volunteers to organize the event much better. So I knew him from that time very closely, and he's also a very inspiring player in the sense that he has been improving a lot recently in the last 1 or 2 years. And given the fact that he's an adult improver, it is actually pretty inspiring to see him grow, despite, of course, having more life commitments than people with much lower age. All right, so going into this game, I was pretty confident going into this game, but of course, seeing his recent run and also like playing a tournament where everyone is over 2100 CFC, including him, I knew that it's going to be a tough game and I need to work hard to be able to get my second win. So I started the game with e4, and I just knew that he's going to play the Sicilian. Probably I didn't know which line he's going to go for, so I just decided to stick with what I know the best. I played knight c3 Sicilian. So Michael plays e6, and I play f4, and now he goes d5. I play knight to f3, very normal stuff. I played this position many times, but it was the first time that I faced a d takes e4 in this position, which is actually a really good move, but for some reason, most people don't play it. The thing is, if black doesn't take on e4, white is going to go bishop b5, trade off that bishop, and put the pawn on d3. And with this structure, with this solid structure on the king side, and if black ever takes after that, I'm going to take with a d pawn and get a good center. White is having a pretty comfortable position. But when black takes on e4 now, the problem is I'm not able to take with a d pawn. I have to take with a knight. Now we get this position where the pawn f4 alone, without the support of an e pawn, is actually not so great. So I knew more theory here. I played bishop to b5. My opponent played bishop d7, of course, not allowing me to take on c6 and double the pawns. And now I play queen to e2. So one of the big ideas on queen e2 is to play f5 next. So like if it's white to play here, white can consider playing f5. The thing is black can't take because they're just going to get checkmated on d6 with a double check. So my opponent played bishop to e7, pretty normal move, because now if I go f5, it is actually not so powerful. Like I was thinking about it. If I go f5 and he takes knight d6 check king f8, I was like, I'm just down a pawn, and this king is pretty safe with all the pieces around. If I take on b7, my knight is going to get trapped. So I was like, f5 is not working anymore, so let's start developing. And I realized that it's a very good idea to put this bishop on b2 because it's going to be very strong in the long diagonal, pointing towards black's king side. So my opponent played knight to f6, I played bishop to b2, and now if he castles, this bishop on b2 is always going to be annoying. Maybe I can even consider some g4 ideas and just blasting open the g file and trying to generate some mating ideas. But of course, I could even just play very naturally with long castles. So my opponent decided to, before castling, to take on e4 and then play bishop to f6, trying to trade more pieces and get into a more comfortable situation. So in this position, I started thinking, and I realized, like, initially I thought, okay, long castle is good. I get my rook into play, and if he takes, I'm going to take with a king and get my king into a good square, which protects all these weak dark squares. But the problem here is that after let's say I long castle, and my opponent just trades on b2 and plays any normal move, let's say even castles, they're not going to be in any sort of trouble. But I realized if I take on f6, Now, if they take with a queen, I have this nice move, knight to e5. And the point is, if black takes on e5 and I take back, all of a sudden the pawn on b7 is hanging. If I take that pawn, the rook is hanging. So black is all of a sudden under huge trouble. In fact, black can still get a decent position after short castles, exploiting this pin with a queen on f6 and rook on a1. Um, and here the best I have is actually to short castle and after rook a d8 or something. It's a very normal position. I can trade everything and take on c6, but black gets enough counterplay. So this should be pretty much equal. White is still slightly better, but nothing crazy. But my opponent was worried of this 95 idea, so he decided to take with a g pawn, which is actually the best move in the position, opening up the g file towards my king. So I decided to short castle actually. It was like, yeah, let's not long castle because I thought after gf6, my opponent is actually going to long castle on this side of the board. And I was thinking if I short castle, I think my king is pretty safe. There's no attacks down the g file. And then when he long castles, maybe I can exploit his king by going some a4, a5, a6 ideas, or maybe some d4, opening up the c file. So I decided to short castle. Another idea that is worthy of consideration here is f5. And I did see that during the game, but I just didn't want to play because of queen e7. And I thought, okay, he's threatening ef5. I can let him take and get these triple pawns, but I was like, a pawn is a pawn at the end of the day. I don't see like instant compensation. So like the best is just to castle and leave it. And black is also going to do the same with long castle, but I thought kind of I'm going to be forced to take on e6 at some point. I wasn't sure about this structure, fixing his double pawns. But this is also fine. I can short castle, long castle, and the game goes on. It's just slightly better for white. Anyways, I decided to short castle, and now I place queen to b6, attacking my bishop on b5. So now if I put this bishop on d3, let's say, he's going to go c4 and win my bishop. I was even considering bishop e2 for a bit. The idea is to meet c4 with king to h1. And now I'm actually having a really good position because if he takes, I'm going to take with the a pawn and open up my rook. But I realized he's not forced to go c4. And he can just long castle, rook g8. Not maybe this rook because the pawn hangs, but long castle and just get a game. And the bishop on e2 is not doing so great. So I decided to play bishop c4, completely stopping the c4 idea. And Michael plays f5, attacking my queen on e4, which I wasn't a big fan of in a sense that it weakens a lot of dark squares. It's not a huge mistake, but I thought it helps me by pushing my queen on e3 because it puts some pressure on c5, and also it weakens some of these dark squares. So I wasn't a big fan of f5. So Michael goes to long castle, and now I play a very nice positional idea, c3. So in general in chess, it's very common to put the pawns at 3 squares in front of the knight, and it's always very good because it completely restricts this knight from jumping forward. So now I'm sure there's no knight d4 shenanigans, putting pressure on c2 and forcing me to an undesirable trade. So he plays rook h8, very natural move, and putting pressure down to g5. So far I think I played a decent game. And here I made a slight inaccuracy, which was very weird. Like, I think it was a huge blunder in the sense that I just missed something primitive completely. But it's just like one loss of a tempo. In this position, I was like, wait a minute, did he just blunder? Can I go knight g5 and attack this pawn on f7 and also the pawn on h7? And I started like, for some reason, I started thinking, his idea is to trap my knight. So I was like, okay, if he goes h6, I take, and then I always come to d6. Of course, my knight is not getting trapped. If he goes f6, I'm going to take this one. Then I started thinking, like, yeah, after f6 takes, can he pin my knight? Can I defend it and then unpin it in time? Like, I started seeing stuff that were way too complicated. I even, like, thought about rook df8. I was like, yes, I attack the rook. I come out from f6. And then after I saw all these scenarios, I convinced myself that I'm winning a pawn, and I played knight g5. And I simply missed rook g7, just defending both pawns. And the moment I played knight g5, like, just 10 seconds afterwards, I saw rook g7, and of course, with a rook on g7, this move doesn't make any sense at all. And what I should have done was just to go rook f2, just protect g2, not let him have a threat when he doubles the rooks, and the game goes on. Anyways, I played knight g5, which was just missing rook g7 basically, and at this point, I was like, yeah, he's going to double the rooks and go h6. So let's defend my g2 pawn. He goes rook to g8, and here's a very important moment where I play the best move, knight back to f3. So one mistake that many people make, I've seen that many, many times, and I was kind of about to make it. You made this mistake of playing knight g5 and completely missing rook g7. One big trap and mistake that many people fall into is that they try to justify the mistake that they just made. So I was starting to think, maybe I should go queen h3 and try to make this knight on g5 count. But the problem is if I go queen h3, I'm not even threatening taking on h7 because rook h8 just wins the piece. So I was like, well, I should just admit my mistake and go back knight to f3. So in this position, Michael plays a weird move that I didn't like at all. Like, I'd like to see it, but I don't think it's a good move. He played knight to d8. So first of all, if he wants to move this knight and put this bishop on c6, I think the best square is the e7 square by far. Like, d8 square, the only benefit it has is defending these pawns, but that's totally and utterly unnecessary. So, and the big problem with moving the knight in general is that it gives me this nice e5 square for the knight. Already here, I was thinking about this weakness on c5, by the way. The pawn on c5 is weak. If I can somehow attack this pawn with a knight, then I'm going to be able to win it because the queen can't move and no other piece can really defend it. So I had this idea in mind. But after knight d8, so first of all, h5 is a really good move here in this position because whenever my knight moves away, he's going to have ideas with h4, h3. Anyways, he plays knight d8, and now instead of knight e1, I can even go knight to e5. So now Michael plays bishop c6, attacking the pawn on g2 with all these pieces, but I simply go bishop to f1 back and completely defending my king side. So here's the moment where I think he made the decisive mistake of the game. He played bishop back to e8. And I think his idea was probably to go f6 and kick my knight from e5 and maybe activate the bishop from here. But this just doesn't work because I simply drop my knight back to d3, a move that he missed. The legend always said the toughest moves in chess to find are the backward knight moves. And this is what my opponent missed here in this position. The point that the c5 pawn is not defendable. So the only way he could have stayed in the game was to play bishop to e4, stopping the knight from coming to d3. And here I had different options. I could play knight e3 anyways and get bishop versus knight and try to claim that I'm slightly better. But even stronger is just to go d3, kick this bishop. And now his idea is that he provokes my pawns to d3 and c4. And now my knight doesn't have a good square to harass this pawn. But I still have ideas like rook d1 with d4, trying to open the d file, maybe double the rooks. And these doubled rooks on the g file, they're shooting at the void. Because the bishop on f1 is firmly defending the g2 pawn. Without the bishop, with this bishop on e8, there's no chance black can engineer something against my king. Anyways, Michael played bishop e8, and now I play knight to d3, attacking the pawn on c5. So he decides to give up a pawn, of course. He plays c4, and now I trade the queens and take the extra pawn on c4. He plays king c7, normal move, guarding the pawn on b6, and now I play my rook to the open file. He goes h5, and here I make a decision where computer thinks it's a slight inaccuracy, but I kind of disagree. I think my move makes a lot of sense. So computer likes c5, because after c5, I'm getting rid of my doubled pawns on the c file, and I'm just going to have a clean extra pawn. And I saw that, but I thought that with this weakness on b6 fixed, with a pawn on c4, I can always try with some knight e5, d4, rook f b2 idea and just win this pawn for free. And that's what I ended up doing in this game, but computer thinks there are some better defenses, and he's right. So I played knight e5, knight c6, knight back to f3, and here he made a huge positional error. So in this position, I'm up a pawn, but I think black can still have excellent drawing chances if he plays the best moves. So Michael plays f6, which is sensible in the sense that it restricts the knight. We already discussed how good these pawns are, three squares in front of the knight. But the problem with f6 is that it creates some new weaknesses on e6 and f5. And you will see how I exploit these weaknesses. The best move was to play knight e7. Again, not knight d8. Knight e7 is always a better square. The point is that if I go d6, he's going to put this bishop on c6, stopping d5, and also stopping rook fb2 because the knight is going to be loose. If I move the knight back, then he's going to, like, let's say I move the knight back to here, then he's going to start improving his bishop, putting pressure on my pieces, and it's actually not going to be easy to win this position. But after f6, now I go d4, and again, he makes an inaccuracy with knight d8. I don't know why he really liked to put the knight on d8 in this game, but it's simply not the best square. Again, knight e7 is the best move because it also stops d5. Now after knight d8, I was like, if I go rook fb2 and try to win the pawn, he's going to go bishop c6 and attack my knight. So bishop c6 is a huge issue, and that's his whole idea of playing knight d8. So I was like, I will first play d5, stopping bishop to c6, and now my idea is to go rook fb2, double the rooks, and win the pawn on d6. So he played rook g4, but now I play a very nice move, knight to d4, enabling my rook to defend the f4 pawn, and also putting more pressure in this new weakness on e6. So Michael defends it with bishop f7, but now I improve my knight, and the pawn on g2 is very well defended with this bishop completely out to lunch. I improve my bishop next. Bishop to e2, rook goes back, now bishop to f3. And now all my pieces are in great squares, and rook fb2 is coming to deliver the killer blow on the b5. So Michael plays h4, and now I go rook f to b2. So if he goes h3, I'm always going to go g3 and lock the queen side. And at the end of the day, at this point, he realized that he's just going to lose all these pawns, all these loose pawns. So he decided to make more loose pawns, but also try to go for some tricks, some tactics. So his idea was to go e5, and when I take on f5, winning the second pawn, he goes bishop to g6, pinning my knight to my rook. But the problem is I saw that, and I was like, after rook g7, bishop e1 takes, I'm up 2 pawns. I can go for that. But then I was like, wait a minute, I can win a third pawn. First, I throw this check with d6, pushing the king back to b8. Now the b6 pawn is weak. So now I make all these trades. I take the rook, he takes my rook, I take on b1, he takes on g7, I trade on e5, and I finally win the pawn on b6. So now in this endgame, I'm up 3 clean extra pawns with much better activity. I have a strong bishop pointing towards b7, and very strong pawn on d6, c5, c6 is coming. So I was pretty sure that this position is going to be an easy win. So he played king a7, I play rook to b5, attacking the 4th pawn in the position. And now he goes rook to g6. So here I have a lot of options. I can go c5 and win the game. But I chose the simplest one. I saw that I can take on e5. After he takes, I go rook to d5. So first things first, if he takes, I'm going to take back with a bishop, and now his knight on d8 is completely dominated. And then I can just create a pass pawn on the king's side and win the game. So the only move is knight to f7. And now I go bishop to h5, attacking the knight. So now if he takes my rook, I fix my pawn structure. I'm going to have 3 clean extra pawns, and the knight can't just defend against both the king's side and queen side majority at the same time. So his only move to not fix my pawn structure is to go rook f6, but now I simply go for a rook endgame. And that's a pretty simple win. I attack the pawn on h4. I'm still up 3 clean extra pawns. And after h3, now I go with this very nice move g4. So my threat is to simply go g5, put the rook behind the passed pawn, and completely paralyze his rook. And if he goes rook g7 right here, just stopping me from going g5, I'm going to bring the king and win the pawn on h3. So my opponent is cooked. He doesn't have any idea. He goes king b6, I go g5, Now I want to put the rook behind. So here he decides to just throw the kitchen sink and try his last trick. He goes rook to f3, but here I saw, okay, I just pushed the pawn, takes, push the pawn again, and there's simply no way to stop my pawn from promotion. So he starts giving some checks, here, here, king f3, and here he plays rook to c3 check. But if he goes rook g2 as well, it's not a salvation because I go rook g4, creating bridge in front of the pawn, and the pawn is going to promote next move. So he tried rook c3 check, and then king to c5, attacking my rook. Here I could even promote and then checkmate on d5. But I was like, why should I just give the rook? Just go rook e4, and the promotion is going to happen anyways in the next move. In fact, computer thinks rook e4 is the faster mate for some reason, because after promotion, he's not forced to take my rook. Anyways, after this move, the promotion is inevitable. There's no more tricks left. So in this position, my opponent resigned the game, and I got a huge win in round 2. So I was pretty happy with this game overall. I think I played a clean game. I was in control all the time. And I think from my opponent's perspective, his biggest mistake in this position was to allow my knight from, like, I think he started messing up here. He allowed my knight to e5, and a little bit later, he allowed my knight back to d3. And I think in general, he started playing way too passively with knight d8 and bishop e8. I think he should have kept these pieces more active and not let me go with my plans, or maybe even go with his active plans of his own with some h5, h4 advances. Anyways, pretty big win. I move on to 2 out of 2, and I'm going to start facing some high-rated players after this game. So I faced the lowest rated player because I was technically in the middle of the field of people with 1 out of 1, but I was just like a little bit above the middle. So that's how I got this pairing. But anyways, going into the next round, I'm facing a high-rated player, one of the 5 contenders to actually win the tournament, and with a black pieces. So it's going to be a huge game, but I'm also in an amazing form. I've been, like you saw the previous video, I won 10 games in a row against low-rated players. I won the first 2 games here pretty comfortably without giving them any chance. So I'm in sensational form. I'm going to play with the black pieces in the next round against one of the strongest players in the field. So stay tuned. It's going to get more interesting, more spicy. Let me know your comments about this game in the comment section down below. And I hope to see you guys soon in the next recaps. Have a good one, guys, and see you soon. Goodbye.